You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yernosian. It's been a while. I know I've been saying that a lot this year, but I decided to take a month off. I did some traveling around Vietnam, and I want to talk about why I did that, and in some ways that it's relatable to everyone. You know, a couple months before my trip, I found myself getting stuck in a bit of a rut. And maybe you've experienced this too. Things like, no matter what, it seems like maybe things aren't going your way, or maybe a certain, the same pattern keeps repeating over and over again. And it seems like no matter what you do, you can't really get out of it. And maybe it seems like something in the world is going against you. Maybe you're in repeated conflicts with some friends or a partner, or something in work keeps having problems, or, chores around the house, you seem to keep having the same problems. And you think maybe there's something wrong with the world around me. Maybe there's something wrong in the environment I'm in. Maybe I should change my environment. And this is kind of the headspace I was in around January. I was stuck in a rut. I kept kind of falling into similar thought patterns, and it was hard for me to see multiple perspectives very easily. So I figured I could use a little bit of a break, maybe explore a little bit, explore a new place that I've never been to, and really challenge myself. So I decided to plan a solo trip to Vietnam, and it was absolutely beautiful. Such a beautiful country with such amazing people, and the food is so incredible. And it just helped me a lot, but not in the ways that I expected. As I was walking through the chaotic cities full of tons of people and motorbikes, and just zipping away every which way, trying to explore and communicate and grow and eat, and just observe the culture of people as people went about their days, and how they did their rituals around food, and what they would do in the evenings, and it was so fun to just experience and be an observer of culture. And then, I did some train travel around Vietnam too. I went up the whole south to north of the country, and got to see some beautiful beaches and beach towns, and explore some nice old towns, and drink a lot of Vietnamese coffee. And I distinctly remember this was about a week into my 3-week trip, sitting in a coffee shop in the old town of Hoi An, which is like this Japanese imperial inspired town. And I was thinking about the perspective that I was stuck in. And I realized that I kind of realized how I should be shifting my perspective. And I noticed my perspective shifting as a result. And I thought to myself, and I wrote in my journal, and I asked myself, is this perspective shift happening because I'm in Vietnam? Or is this perspective shift happening because just because of me? Maybe it's the fact that I shook things up, that I could do it, but maybe I don't need to do that. The perspective shift came from within me. It wasn't, being in Vietnam didn't help at all. I didn't gain any special knowledge while in Vietnam. I didn't gain a newfound understanding of the world. I just merely, I don't know, I guess I merely just changed my environment, and that helped a little bit, but I think more it was me. And when I look back at what the time before my trip was, between me realizing that I was stuck in a rut and wanted to and wanted a perspective shift. And actually getting that perspective shift, it wasn't like an on-off switch. This was a gradual process. But the journey, the gradual journey, sometimes we get so lost in it that we don't even realize we're on the journey until we've already gotten to the end. When we get to the end, it's easy to see like how far we've come. But taking each step is so indistinct from the other, or seemingly indistinct. So how do we change perspective? And this comes back to the a question I'm trying to answer in my life is, how do I change perspective from a more fundamental way? I mentioned that for me, 2024 is a year of going back to the basics. And I think that means one part of that must be understanding how this perspectival shifts can happen within me without needing to rely on things outside of me. Because, traveling isn't always a thing we can do. It's not always affordable. It's not always the right solution. And sometimes traveling for the wrong reasons can make the traveling go stale. You can stop. It's easy to not enjoy the place you're at if you have a bad perspective going into it, or you're trying to run away from something. Because we don't want to go. Why go to someone's home? Why explore someone's home with the perspective of, it's not that I want to be here, it's that I want to be away from my home. That's not a very authentic way to travel. It's not a very respectful way to travel. And I feel like it's easier to miss a lot of the beauty in the places that we're at because of that. An example I'll give is, and maybe this is just from me and my perspective, but I remember coming to this one rural place called Ninh Binh. And it is, to describe it for you, imagine flatland, rice fields, many rice fields as far as the eye can see. And in the distance, these towering limestone giants, these stone hills that just jut out like islands among the flat plain. And among them, there are like trees, sometimes forests, goats will sometimes walk among them. And so as I walked around these little towns around Ninh Binh, walking down dirt roads as far as I could take them, I found myself in these magical environments that were hard to find, or were hard to find if you were looking for touristy locations, but were so nurturing. Just finding myself being surrounded by mountains in a seemingly secluded place, which isn't really that secluded, because that the tourist areas and the busy roads are really not that far from you, maybe less than a mile or a couple of kilometers. But it just feels so silent, and you can hear the croaks of the frogs and the flapping of wings of the cranes and the little the quacks of the ducks and the chirping of various insects, and occasionally a bleating of a goat. And it's just this harmonious sound, the sound of the beings that are there. It seems like silence. It seems like peace, but it's actually its own form of chaos. This life is everywhere. This dynamic movement of life is everywhere for us to experience. And having just come from these big cities and going to this secluded place, it was a beautiful contrast, and it reminded me that even in chaos, the chaos of the cities, there's a peace, there is an order. And even in this ordered place of nature, there is chaos. There are disturbances. It's just a matter of perspective, how you view it. Many of us maybe get caught in the perspective of being around people is chaotic and noisy, and being in nature is peaceful and quiet. But really, to suggest that is to ignore the beauty and the order that comes with civilization and with people and with society, and ignoring the chaos and the loudness that comes with nature. Nothing is one or the other. Neither of these are pure or evil. There's this mix. There is a mix. And maybe that's some of the things that, some of the ancients were trying to tell us all this time. This concept of yin yang, good, evil, order, chaos. None of these exist without the other. And they're both necessary. They both seem to be necessary for the lives we live. So why consider one perspective and not the other? So going back to the whole idea of like these perspectival shifts, how do you then shift this perspective? How do you see the beauty of, how do you see the order in a busy city? How do you see the chaos in nature? Maybe it's a matter of just observing, trying to shift your perspective away. Now, that's easy for me to say. I'm someone who is very readily, who can readily like shift perspective. It's something that I've practiced at a lot, and something that I've tried to do many times. I've gone through many perspective shifts throughout my life. But you know what? I bet you have too. And I bet you could find some perspective shifts in your past. Think about, let's do like an exercise together. Think about who you were 5 years ago, and let's describe them. For me, Vahagan of 5 years ago, so this would be 2019. 2019 Vahagan was in a relationship that was going on for 4 years, and he was happy with, but he was a little shaky. It was a little shaky because he didn't really know what he wanted next. 2019 Vahagan thought that was very focused on achievement and work, thinking that if I got the next milestone, if I made as much money as possible, I would be able to live a life I'm happy with. And you know what? I'm happy with this life now, but like I don't want to be working forever. So I would be able to retire and, enjoy my life as I see fit. But 2019 Vahagan also wasn't. 2019 Vahagan was pretty empathetic with people. He'd consider himself an empathetic person. Like he maybe wouldn't understand what other people that were different from him were going through. But he could like try to understand. He could try to imagine what that understanding would be like. 2019 Vahagan was very set in his ways. He wanted stability. He enjoyed the comfort of certainty, and but he had he had risks here and there, but still like wanted to stay as certain as possible. 2019 Vahagan would think that 2024 Vahagan was taking a lot of risks. In fact, 2019 Vahagan would think that 2024 Vahagan has probably squandered a lot of the work that 2019 Vahagan did. But 2019 Vahagan would not quite understand 2024 Vahagan because we are fundamentally different people at this point. We have completely different points of view on what life is, and 2024 Vahagan, for all of the love I give him, I mean, he was an important part of my life, obviously. I wouldn't be here today without him, but he ultimately struggled with problems he didn't even know about. He struggled with understanding what his feelings were. He struggled with communicating his emotions because he didn't even know what his emotions truly were. He spent a lot of time in trying to solve the issues that he thought he had, but didn't realize he was asking the wrong questions. He he thought he was looking for the wrong solutions because he didn't know what the true issues were. He didn't realize there was a side of him that he had never experienced before. And maybe that's something you can relate to, right? People say, we say that hindsight is 20/20, that we have perfect vision looking at hindsight because we know exactly what happened. The beauty of the past is that it is 100% certain. The things that happened. The problem with the future is that it is not certain at all. Anything can happen. And because of that, anything can change it. So what is the point of this exercise, of doing this, what I call mental time travel or perspective time travel? The point is to show you that you are different in these points of time. You've probably changed in the last 5 years. You've probably changed in the last year. You've probably changed in the last 10 years. And you've probably changed in different ways in all of these. Not only are you different, but your change is different. And so what really changed you? What changed you between now and 6 months ago, now and a year ago, now and 3 years ago, now and 5 years ago? Maybe there were some big life events for a couple of those. Like, I'm sure, like, if you go back far enough, you could say, like, oh yeah, there were some major life events. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice if you say that it's just the life events that led to who you are today, because it is, like I said, it is easier to ignore the journey, the small steps we're making in the journey. And it's easier to tell when we've made it far along the journey just by seeing how far we've changed, how far we've come, how much we've changed. And if there's a big event, a big life event that happens externally, it may seem like, oh yeah, that's what happened. Oh, I got married, or I got a new job, or I had a kid, or something like that. And it's easy to see that these are the things that drive us to change as people. In fact, many people say that. Many people have told me that, like, I'll never gain the perspective of being a parent without having a child, which maybe I won't, but maybe that I don't need all perspectives in my life. Maybe there are some perspectives that I can get similar overlapping perspectives. Like, I don't need a child to have the perspective of empathy and to care about the lives of people that aren't related to me. Like, that maybe I don't have the perspective of nurturing someone from birth, but that's a perspective I'm okay with not having for now. Because what helps me in building in experiencing my life and existing in the life that I want to live is having empathy toward people, especially people that aren't related to me by blood. Because I've mentioned this on other episodes that I don't think that genealogy matters. I don't think that bloodline matters. I think ultimately humans we are more similar than we are different. When I've traveled many places in the world, and you start to notice that there are a lot more similarities among us than there are differences. In fact, the differences are very few and far between, and are mostly limited to the resources we had available more than anything else. So the outside is arbitrary. All these life events that you want to point to and say, this changed me as a person, I challenge you to find the gradual journey you made, because these perspectival shifts, these growths that we do, aren't just switches that happen. They are gradual processes that take place over months, years, decades even, or days. It depends, depending on how big of a shift we're talking about, right? Some shifts can happen a lot sooner, but only when you're practiced. And perspective shifts do take practice. The first time you really change your perspective can take a long, long time. It can take years, decades. Some people never do it. But I think if you look back to the perspective shifts that you have done in the past, and I guarantee you probably have had a couple, then you'll be more on. Then you can be more aware of when you're making these changes yourself. And so you don't need to go on a trip to a foreign country. You don't need to break up with your partner. You don't need to get a new job to have these big shifts of your mindset. It instead just takes the hard work, the look inside, the slowing down, taking a mental step back from the situation that is causing you, that you feel like you're stuck in. Take a step back. Maybe find some ways of grounding yourself. Take some walks. Spend some time with loved ones. Cook a meal. Eat a good meal. Take some breathing exercises. Maybe do a little exercise. Maybe try working on a puzzle or something, or reading a book. Reading a book is a great way to share in the perspective of another. All these ways are just some little ideas to help you maybe shift your mental attention away from the cycle that you seem to be in, and let your mind shift out of it. Maybe let your mind come up with some creative solutions to your dilemma. And then ultimately try to guide it toward the perspective shift that you're looking for. I find that books can be an effective way of helping guide yourself out of a perspective shift. Talking to other people and getting people who you trust perspective on things is a good way to get out of a perspective shift. Journaling is a good way to get out of a perspective shift, to get into a perspective shift. Like, just journal the things what you're feeling. Why is this current perspective causing you pain? Where is that pain coming from? Maybe put a name to it. Before my Vietnam trip, I actually had a little conversation with the embodiment of my shame. I kind of created not a visual, but like a mental image of my shame as some kind of demon. And I gave it a name, and we had a small conversation that I then noted down in my notebook. And I think this was an important thing for me because shame has been an important part of my upbringing. There was a lot of shame growing up especially from my dad's side, but also like just from the general Christian upbringing I came from. Shame is a very powerful part of the religion. And I've been on a decades-long battle with my shame, and my shame was coming up again. And instead of trying to bat it away and trying to shoo it away, I decided to let it in and hear it out. And hear out what my shame was actually trying to tell me. And I got this inspiration through Carl Jung. When Jung did his deep dive into himself for the Red Book and encountered his own demons, he gained great insights. And so I'm hoping that I too can gain some kind of great insights, or at least have a healthier relationship with my shame once my shame comes out. Because now I feel like after I embodied it and kind of wrote out what I would expect it to say, I kind of started to get an understanding of what the motivation of my shame is. And who doesn't want to understand the voices in their head, right? Who doesn't want to understand the chaos that's up in here? The feelings that we feel, the urges, the sensations, the dreams. Humans have been trying to understand these things for millennia. For as long as we've been able to write, we've been talking about dreams. We've been talking about these sensations. We've been talking about order and disorder, good and evil. And we've been talking about this chaos in our minds without really without understanding that it was even in our minds. But this is a part of the human condition that we can't escape. You can try, but it's going to only haunt you and cause you pain the whole way through. So why try to do it? Why try to run from your demons and letting them haunt you when you can befriend them and see what they want and live in a more harmonious life around it? And maybe that's some of the perspective shift that I got from Vietnam, but I think I already had some of that perspective going into it. And maybe the perspective shift that I did get from Vietnam wasn't actually from the country, but was actually just a reminder of a perspective that I've had before, but I sometimes forget. Because ruts happen, we sometimes fall into cycles, fall into bad habits that we used to have, fall into biases that we used to hold. Even when we try to shift our perspective, some of these biases are hard to actually get rid of. And that's okay. We're human after all. And sometimes we fall into these situations, and that's just, that's the curse of consciousness, if you will. But it's okay. It's okay to be in that space. It's okay to be in a rut. But the true beauty, the true sign of growth is when when you're in that rut, and when you know how to get yourself out of that rut. Not with a change of job or a change of scenery or a change of family, but with a change in your perspective. Because ultimately it's your perspective that is governing how you're experiencing the world. It's not the world that has to change for you. Maybe you have to change for the world a little bit. Anyway, those are some of my initial reflections on my trip. I'm sure I'll have more to talk about over the next few months as I digest and really reflect on the trip, and especially now that I'm past jet lag and can actually think properly. So thank you for joining me. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to hit a like or heart the pod. Follow us and share the podcast. It helps out. And as always, embrace your chaos with kindness. Thank you so much.